Good evening, everybody. You have some seats. Come on in. You all, and thank you for coming to join us tonight for our first public. Good evening, everybody. Forward from concept to near reality, and I'm excited for you to learn more about the project from our presenters. But before we dive in, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. For those of you joining us virtually, thank you for being here. If you have any questions about tonight's presentation, please submit them to contact@summitmetroparks.org. We will follow up with you as quickly as we can with your questions and comments in the coming days. Next, we have new ways that you can keep in touch. Please visit our updated website, which is here on the screen. It's bit.ly/freethefalls, and sign up to receive periodic email updates. You can also use the sign-up sheet here tonight, or at the link on the web page. You'll find them outside on the table. So also, this is a low waste. It's a low waste event. Our partners at the Akron Zoo have graciously offered to compost our cups and our napkins. Please take a look for those bins with composting signage. For those two items, everything else can be recycled or thrown away as usual. We'd like to thank the Summit Metro Parks Foundation for handling this for us. Restrooms are located out the doors to the right, and they'll be on your left just as you approach the front desk. Finally, please hold all your questions to the end. We've reserved time for question and answer at the end, and we will as we have a very packed agenda, and want to ensure that we remain on time as closely as possible so that you guys can get home and enjoy your evening. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Mayor Don Walters of Cuyahoga Falls and Mayor Dan Horgan of Akron. Mayor Walters, would you like to start us off?
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. This is very impressive. We know we have a mission, right? We need to get the dam down, but it's not quite that easy. There's a lot that goes into it, besides the funding. It's always about money. Can't do anything without the money, and that's all in the works, too. That's changed quite a bit throughout the beginning of this project. However, what we do know is you cannot ever improve on Mother Nature. When the dam was put in, totally changed the river, totally changed the health of the river in that area, and it's not where it needs to be. So I'm assuming most of you in the room here tonight are in favor of removing the dam.
Yeah.
If you talk to anyone in the know about the environment and healthy rivers, it has to come down. It does not need to be there. It should have never been put there. It didn't function as intended. So anyhow, we're on a mission to do that. A lot going on behind the scenes. We'll try and keep you up to speed with that as time goes on. However, we know that Mother Nature is free-flowing, and the rest of the river has exploded with activity. The kayaking, the inner tubing, the hiking, there's rock climbing now on the walls, fishing. All those things are important. We need to open that up. And where the river comes down, flows south, turns north, that needs to be free-flowing, and it will be soon, but there's still a lot of work ahead of us. It can't happen without your support. So we have elected officials that control the purse strings at the state level, federal level, all over the place. That's where you come in. So we may need your assistance reaching out to representatives. We'll let you know too as that goes on. But thank you very much for your support. Very impressive to come out on Halloween. Thank you.
I didn't expect a round of applause if I'm in Cuyahoga Falls, so that's okay. I'm teasing. Thank you, Mayor, for hosting that. Thank you, Lisa. And all the partners, really. I don't think this event gets done without everybody in the room. And it's really a crowning achievement, career-wise, to see this get done. having grown up a block away from the bridge, probably 4 or 5 blocks away from the dam, it is sat there forever to sit there and say it doesn't work. I don't think there's anybody that thinks, hey, we should keep it up just for posterity's sake. We want to take this down. We've been committed to taking it down and working with all of the partners to be able to do it. But something to keep in mind, because it will return the river to its previous glory, and then the river eventually cleans itself. Keep in mind that there is a significant amount of work being done in Akron around sewers and combined sewers and overflow into the river. And we've taken our responsibility to the tune of about $730 million so far in cleaning up the river, which has helped significantly in doing that. There's a couple of big projects on never abdicated our role, accepted the responsibility for it. It's 150 years of industrial policy. We won't get into that argument. And really, it's been at the cost of businesses and consumers in the city of Akron that dump into that. But we've taken that and we've cleaned it up significantly and reduced overflows. I can get into the percentages, but I won't. There's a couple more projects going on very close to where the dam is. And we are working on to get those done and trying to save some money too. So you'll see a significant amount of work being done from Front Street to that bridge, all the way to the high level bridge. It kind of wraps around Riverside. It's kind of going to look like a construction zone for a while, but when it's done, you'll not recognize the area that we've grown up and watched. And just one interesting note, real quick. I get to go to Columbus every once in a while, and a guy pulled me aside from the BMB. And he's a lawyer for the BMB, and this was about 10 years ago. Maybe it was about 7 years ago. He said, "Hey, you work for the city of Akron, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm the mayor." He said, "I used to live right on Riverside. Let me know when you're getting that dam down. I'm coming home." I mean, that's the kind of interest that is generated. This is 2 hours away. So thank you all for coming. I think the end goal is getting close, and we'll keep pushing it forward with resources and with all of your help. So, Lisa, thanks again.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to introduce Liz Walters, who is the president of our Summit County Council.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. This is an impressive room, especially on Halloween. It's exciting for me to be across the street from my alma mater, Black Tiger. So I just was here to share with all of you on behalf of the county executive Eileen Shapiro and my colleagues on council. We're so excited to be a part of this project. Like all of our partners, we've begun the work of kind of combing through our budgets to find those resources to make sure that when the time comes, there is local match money available. As you've heard already, this project is a strong collaboration between your local government, your county government, your state government, your federal government. Not often these days we hear about all those groups working well together, but can tell you for sure that we're all united in our vision to free the falls as quickly as we can. I think that as we look ahead here in Summit County, this is the continuation of a lot of work we've been doing over the years, from Monroe Falls to Peninsula. This is the last dam standing on the river. And I don't want to steal any thunder from our Metro Park staff, but in addition to all the work you're seeing above the water, what we are starting to see from an environmental standpoint are incredibly positive markers. And I think they'll have a lot of fun things to share with you all tonight. We couldn't be more proud. And because they won't say it themselves, will you please give a big round of applause to the incredible team at the Summit County Metro Park who's been leading us. As we go through this project together and go on this journey, as the mayor's mentioned, it'll be a while. But when we come out of this, we have an incredible moment of pride for ourselves, which is we're going to be one of the greenest cities on a beautiful river that is going to be the cleanest it's ever been, and in my lifetime certainly, and for many more of you in this room. So thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for being committed to being here tonight to learn more about it, and we can't wait to keep working in partnership with Lisa and her team as we get this project done. Thanks, everybody.
All right, so you've been waiting to get to the fun stuff. Now we're there. All right, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Walton. She's the Summit Metro Parks Chief of Marketing and Communications, and she's got a video that we've been working on. Stephanie.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to everyone for being here tonight. I'm really excited for you guys to see our new Free the Falls video. You are the first members of the public to see it. It is brand new, hot off the presses. So I really want to thank the entire stakeholder team for helping us pull this video together. It was really important that we create the video so that the public really understands what this project is about. It's so important that we involve the public in the project, that you guys and everyone in Summit County understands why we need to do this, the benefits of doing it, and exactly how it's going to happen, and what things are going to look like in the interim, as several of the other speakers have mentioned. So really excited for you to see it. One caveat is that many of the things that you'll see in the video are still in the design phase. So, it's a little bit draft. Some of the process is still draft, but this should give you a good idea of what to expect in the years to come. So without further ado, we'll do the video. I hope you enjoy it.
The Cuyahoga River Gorge. Created by retreating glaciers at the end of the last ice age, it's peaceful and it's dramatic. In it sits Gorge Metro Park, an escape and a refuge from the day-to-day hustle and bustle and a treasured Summit County destination. Through it flows the iconic Cuyahoga River. Flowing southwest from its headwaters in Geauga County, the river encounters a large deposit of bedrock in Cuyahoga Falls, forcing it to make a sharp U-turn before finishing its journey to Lake Erie. With rocky outcrops, caves, and dramatic scenery, the area where the river turns towards the north has attracted visitors for more than 150 years. Coming from near and far, outdoor enthusiasts once flocked to the gorge to view the big falls of the Cuyahoga and to enjoy the amusement park rides, dance halls, picnicking, and more. And that tradition continues today at the 155-acre Gorge Metro Park. But over the years, the river has faced serious challenges. In 1911, the massive Gorge Dam was built to support electricity generation for streetcars and city lights. Its construction put the famous Big Falls underwater and forever altered the landscape of the gorge. In the 1950s, the Cuyahoga had become a virtual sewer. As the region industrialized, the river became extremely polluted. Like other rivers around the country, the Cuyahoga between Akron and Cleveland became a convenient dumping ground for raw sewage, industrial waste, toxins, and polluted runoff. Thanks to the Federal Clean Water Act and the entire Cuyahoga River community, the river has largely recovered from its polluted past. But the Gorge Dam remains. Today, the 58-foot-high, 425-foot-wide remnant of the past serves no useful purpose. In fact, the dam is the only thing standing in the way of a completely free-flowing Cuyahoga River from Kent to Lake Erie. Even though dams were built with good intentions, they cause a lot of problems for water quality. In addition to preventing fish from traveling freely, dams affect the dissolved oxygen, flow, and temperature of the river. They also reduce habitat, trap and concentrate sediments and toxins, and alter the food web of the dam pool. 5 other dams have already been removed on the Cuyahoga, resulting in nearly 10 miles of restored river. And what's good for the fish is also good for the people. These projects helped improve quality of life and drive economic development along the riverfronts in these communities over the past 10 years. That's why a large group of community partners have joined forces to free the falls at Gorge Metro Park. US EPA intends to fund the majority of the project through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and non-federal funds will also be required. A funding plan for sediment remediation, construction of the sediment disposal site, dam removal, and restoration of the dam pool is in progress. Meanwhile, the City of Akron's ongoing sewer system upgrade requires construction work in the same area. While both projects are being carefully planned and coordinated to minimize disruptions to the public, there will be park and trail closures over the next several years. Although the result will be worth it, taking down a dam this big isn't easy. So how will we do it? First, nearly 1 million cubic yards of sediment must be removed from behind the dam. The sediment has been collecting for 100 years and contains pollutants consistent with the area's industrial past. A mechanical dredge system consisting of a clamshell bucket, crane, and scow barge will troll the reservoir, slowly removing sediment scoop by scoop. This work will likely be completed over 2 construction seasons. Each full scow barge will then be unloaded at a staging area where it will be screened to remove any large debris. The still wet sediment will then be pumped through a temporary pipeline under the Front Street Bridge and then alongside High Bridge Trail. It will continue under the high-level bridge at North Main Street to the Chuckery area of Cascade Valley Metro Park, about 2 miles from the dam. The Chuckery area was historically a dumping site and will be utilized as the permanent disposal area for the contaminated sediment. To make room to store the sediment and concrete mixture, trees must be removed from a portion of the Chuckery area. The sediment is mixed with concrete in the pipeline to form a more solid material that can be contoured before it is fully stabilized. This is an innovative and safe approach that has been used at sites across the country. The disposal area is designed to ensure permanent stabilization of the sediment mounds, minimize impacts to buried utilities, and appropriately manage stormwater. After final grading is complete, the sediment mounds will be capped with soil and the area will be planted with a native mix of trees and vegetation, and contoured to look as natural as possible. Within about 10 years, the final conditions will result in a biodiverse habitat that will complement the natural beauty of Cascade Valley Metro Park. Next, the dam itself will be removed. The water level of the reservoir will slowly drop as the dam is dismantled. The dam will be deconstructed using a barge-mounted excavator. To lessen the impacts to the area and to reduce costs, it may be possible to remove only the center spillway and exposed piping of the dam. If left intact, the remaining sections of the dam could then serve as a cultural resource and potentially be repurposed as a river overlook for park visitors. The final step of this project will be to restore the river corridor to its natural state with a rocky channel and vegetation that will promote a healthy river ecosystem. Restoring the original grandeur of the gorge is our region's path to a vibrant future for the health of the river, its watershed, and its people. That future will bring clean water, natural beauty, recreational opportunities, educational experiences, and economic development. This project has national significance and is supported by more than 50 agencies, businesses, and civic organizations, as well as the public. Dam removal is critical to restoring the Cuyahoga River and completing a recovery decades in the making. From our industrial roots flows a new future, one that carries Summit County forward while honoring our rich history. The result will be a healthy, free-flowing Cuyahoga River for all to enjoy.
Process. We all understood what the process would be like, but seeing this video has helped really everyone else. So I hope that was helpful for you. So next I'm going to introduce you to Mike Johnson. He's the Summit Metro Parks Chief of Conservation, and he's going to be talking about the background and the current status of dam removal.
Thank you very much. I have a very brief presentation, and when I'm done, I hope that you walk away with 2 things. There's 2 things I want everybody to get from this. The first is that this has truly been a lengthy process, and sometimes we get feedback like, why is it taking so long? Well, this is a big dam, and there's a lot of work going into this to make sure it's done right. But the reality is this really isn't taking that long. Things are moving pretty fast. And I would say that we're kind of in an exponential phase right now where things are moving faster and faster. So that's the first thing I hope that everybody understands. And then I also want to leave you with one more piece of information, and that is the first major action that's going to happen on the landscape. The first thing that the public would actually notice is going to happen within the next few weeks. So with that said, let's start from the beginning. It's kind of hard to follow that video, isn't it? So our story begins, like the video said, in 1911, when we constructed the dam on the Cuyahoga River. Again, this dam was built primarily for hydroelectricity. Oh, thank you. It was built primarily for hydroelectricity, but it also served as a source of cooling water for a coal-fired power plant that existed on the banks of the river just upstream of the dam. The 1940s to the 1960s saw our great industrial era, which really did a number for water quality. This was a great, this industrial era is responsible for a lot of things that made our country great, but it came at a cost. That cost was largely to water quality. And really, during this time period, our Cuyahoga River, like many rivers, just essentially became an open sewer. Yeah. 1958, the hydro plant that was built, that the dam was originally built to facilitate, it ceased operations. It never was very efficient, and that's largely due to the unpredictable flow of the Cuyahoga. The Cuyahoga was just a little bit too small to really ever efficiently produce much electricity. 1969, the Cuyahoga River burned for the last time. This wasn't the first time it burned, but it was the last, and it brought national attention to our river and basically led to the creation of the Clean Water Act, which, by the way, is 50 years old this year. So we are right here in Akron and Cuyahoga Falls. Our river really was the impetus for this great act of Congress. 1991, the coal-fired power plant ceased operations and it was subsequently raised. At this point, the dam has no useful purpose, but it still has all the impacts associated with dams, like we discussed in the video. The 1990s through the 2000s, the Cuyahoga River started getting better, but it still wasn't getting as good as it should have been. And our wonderful Ohio EPA took a closer look at what was going on in the river. And what they found was that these dams, these many dams in the Cuyahoga, as well as our other rivers, were in and of themselves a source of pollution. And that began the great era of dam removal here in the Cuyahoga. There have been 5 dams removed so far, and the Brecksville Dam being the most recent. That brings us up to about 2015, and this is when things start getting real. 2015, the Ohio EPA, in association with the Cuyahoga River Area of Concern and Tetra Tech, issued the first feasibility study that was focusing on what it would take to remove the Gorge Dam. This is when things really started picking up steam and getting real. 2016, Summit Metro Parks, kind of we're seeing the writing on the wall. We decided to pull together a group of local interested parties. We called ourselves the stakeholders, and we branded ourselves Free the Falls. I grew up here in Cuyahoga Falls, and I can't tell you how many people think that we are named after the dam. We are not named after the dam. We're named after the beautiful waterfall it sits on top of. So we decided to name ourselves Free the Falls and get this really cool logo. I just love that. 2018, our partners at the Ohio EPA signed an agreement with the US EPA to do the design and engineering for the sediment removal and the safe disposal of the sediment. That process is ongoing. We are wrapping it up. Later on, other people are going to talk about where we are in that process. But that was about a $6 million project and was largely federally funded. And fast forward now to 2020, and our wonderful partners at the City of Akron stepped forward. They agreed to take the responsibility for the design and the engineering work on actually taking down the dam. And this phase of the project is also ongoing. 2022, Summit Metro Parks in the city of Akron applied for funding to construct the sediment disposal area. That is the 30-acre footprint, and you can see it on this map. It's right here. This is Peck Road. If you've ever driven into the Chuckery to see the signal tree, it's this long road. Right off to the left is a 30-acre footprint. That's where the sediment is going to go. And to prepare conditions for the construction of this area, Summit Metro Parks will begin to clear the vegetation within the next few weeks, maybe 2 months at the latest. So that is really one of the really big pieces of news we wanted to share with you today. We wanted to have this meeting in advance of this activity taking place to let everybody know that things are actually starting to happen on the ground. And that's something that people are going to notice. And again, this is just a map showing that area. Ramsey, if you could just show them, it's this area off of Peck Road near the Chuckery Trail. And it currently is vegetated, but it's a pretty low quality area. We did look for the best, most environmentally friendly place we could put this. That area historically had been abused in the past. It was formerly, before the parks took it over and the city got it, it was a dumping area, essentially. And you can see it right there. It's right about here. So that's happening right now over the next few weeks. After that, things are going to continue to move faster. So we're planning on clearing that area 2022, maybe early 2023. 2023, we plan to be constructing that area where we're going to put that sediment. 2024 through 2025, we hope to begin the dredging of that material from behind that dam and moving it down to this disposal area. And 2025 to 2026 is the projected time period for actually removing the physical structure that is the dam. So this is the update on where we are now. And again, we will start to see action taking place in our park within the next few weeks. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Mary Beth Giancarlo. She is going to be talking about the design of the sediment remediation and disposal area. Mary Beth? I would also like to take a quick moment to introduce our team. Come up here. So yeah, again, my name is Mary Beth Giancarlo with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Great Lakes Office. We're based out of Chicago, Illinois. And I am a project manager, and I am the lead on the remedial design for the sediment remediation and the disposal area.
Hi everyone, I'm Courtney Winter. I'm also with US EPA out of Great Lakes National Program Office in Chicago, and I will be the project manager for the sediment remediation park.
My name is Marty Reeve. I work for CH2M Hill. Our firm has been doing the design work for the sediment removal.
Good evening. My name is Bill Andrew. I'm also with CH2M Hill, and I'm the design manager for the sediment remediation project.
All right, thank you. All right. So, clicker. All right, so for the first half of this presentation, I'll be giving you a high-level overview of what we've been doing for these last few years. And then I'll turn it over to our designers, who will go into a bit more technical detail on some of the changes that we have made to some of the remedial technology. And then I'll come back and we'll finish off with the next steps and cost and schedule. And so, I know we've mentioned this a few times tonight, but I know it's frustrating for how long it feels like this process is taking, but my hope is that after this presentation, you'll have a better understanding of why we needed that time, and that you'll agree that it was a good use of our time, and that you leave today with the confidence that our team is doing everything that we can to design the sediment remediation project. It's based on sound technology, it's safe, it meets our remedial and restoration goals, and it efficiently utilizes federal and non-federal funds. All right, so again, high-level overview. We've done a ton of sampling over the last few years, so I'm just going to quickly go through some of the work we've done in the dam pool and at the Checkery area. So in 2019, we had a contractor out in the field conducting a comprehensive assessment of the underwater and nearshore conditions. They performed a bathymetric survey, side scan sonar, imaging, magnetometer survey, topographic survey along the shoreline. Big words, but basically the purpose of that was to obtain information on water depth from the center of the channel all the way to the water's edge, sediment thickness to get an idea on how thick the sediment is, and see if there were any structures, utilities, or debris that's on the bottom of the river. So the results of these surveys were used to help us with a few things. It was necessary in order to come up with our current volume of material that needed to be dredged, dewatered, and disposed of. If there was anything that was obstructing our ability to remove the sediment, helps us define the means and methods that the dredging contractor will use to remove and handle the sediment, and to help us develop cut lines so that the dredging contractor knows exactly how close they can get to the shoreline and how deep they'll be able to dredge throughout the entire dam pool. So we had another sampling vessel in the dam pool. It collected these long sediment cores in some locations. They were pulling up material that was 20 feet below the sediment surface. So the samples that we collected from the sediment samples that we collected, we were looking for the physical properties like grain size, moisture content, organic content. So the results would tell us how we would handle the material when we dewatered and disposed of it. So we're also looking for consistency or lack thereof to see if the sediment was the same throughout the entire dam pool. From a lateral standpoint, whether the material was the same right in front of the dam as it was about a mile upstream of the dam, and vertically, is the sediment that's at the sediment surface the same or different than sediment that you'd find 20 feet down. And this is important because we need to make sure that that our approach to dewatering and how we're going to handle and dispose of sediment can adapt to the variability in the sediment. And so then the samples were actually sent to a lab where we conducted a treatability study, which is really cool process where the scientists and engineers in the lab, testing the sediment under various conditions to measure and verify the effectiveness of our dewatering technology. And Marty will talk a little bit about that a little bit later. All right, so more surveying work. We had surveyed along the High Bridge Trail and the Checkery area. The primary purpose for this is to understand our land area boundaries, features such as elevation changes. This defines the site conditions within the area that we're working. It aids in the development of an efficient dredge material transport route. We will be using the High Bridge Trail for piping the sediment to the Checkery area. And this information also becomes important when we design our stormwater management system at the disposal area. All right, so in 2019, and then again in 2021, we performed soil and groundwater sampling within the Checkery area. We conducted, we drilled borings throughout the area, and we also dug some test pits on the east side of Peck Road. And we sent all those soil and groundwater samples to the lab for analysis.
And so we drilled deep underground throughout the disposal area to capture visual observations of the different soil layers. We performed tests in the field and collected samples for lab analysis. And it's very important for us to understand and define the differing soil conditions so that way we can verify that this area can actually withstand the load of the sediment and that it can withstand the load of the sediment and verify that the chuckery area is definitely the location for the permanent placement of the contaminated sediment. And so we were talking about the soil, the test pits that we dug for on the east side of Peck Road. And so with that information, we are able to pre-qualify that soil, and we now have a local, instead of having to import clean fill, we have a local native site where we are able to cost efficiently use material to cap the disposal area. Okay, so in 2021, we sampled, I'm actually not sure what people refer to this property as. This is where the former power plant resided. And so this power plant property is going to be the location that we're staging the support systems for the dredging in the dam pool. These walls are holding back urban fill, and there's infrastructure underground left over from the facilities that used to operate here. And our current plan is to dredge as close to this wall as we can get. So therefore, we wanted to assess the condition of the walls and conduct a stability evaluation. We tried to find documentation of how and when the concrete and sheet pile walls were built, but we didn't have any luck. So we had to conduct a forensic engineering investigation of the property, which is basically like being on an episode of CSI. We're gathering lines of evidence to come up with and piece together the story and to come up with the assessment, to come up with an assessment for evaluating the condition and the stability of the walls. So first we started with an electromagnetic survey to see if we could identify any structural elements like tiebacks that are supporting the wall that are underground, and to help us determine where we need to dig. We also sent scuba divers into the river to capture images above and below the water, to take measurements and assess the structural integrity of the walls. We dug into the ground behind the walls to expose structural elements, and we collected samples of those to a lab. By understanding these physical properties, we can determine how stable the property will be under different scenarios in the near term when we remove all the sediment from the dam pool, and in the long term after the sediment in the dam is gone, the water elevation is dropped. We also conducted seismic testing to see if we could determine the depth of the sheet pile and concrete walls. And I will speak to a little bit of the results of this evaluation in a little bit. But I want to jump back over to the disposal area. So like I mentioned, we had this location that was identified in the feasibility study, but what we really needed to do was to understand whether or not this is going to ultimately be the permanent location for the storage of this material. So we had to conduct a global stability evaluation. So we look at whether or not there are any failures on the ground surface based on all of that subsurface data that we collected in 2019 and 2021. So the results of this evaluation show that there are locations where the soil isn't strong enough to support the weight of all of that sediment that we'll place on top of it. So we have to actually excavate a portion of the chuckery area and fill it back in with soil that has stronger physical properties so we can meet our long-term factor of safety for stability. Our design engineers also calculated how long it will take for the sediment to consolidate and how much it will settle. So it's about 12 to 18 inches over a year. So the estimated settlement is acceptable. It does not require any ground improvements beyond what is needed for global stability, which is very good news, saves us money. And the same goes with the utility displacement evaluation. So the yellow line on this graphic represents the city of Akron's utility that runs through the disposal area, and as you can see, it runs right up against the south end of our disposal area. This line is being rehabilitated by the city of Akron, and so we need to make sure that this utility is not subjected to any impacts as a result of our sediment remediation project and placing material in this area. So our modeling shows minimal displacement or lateral movement of this utility. And the results fall well within industry standards. So therefore, again, we do not have to install any infrastructure to protect this utility. Again, really good news. So stormwater. So we are obviously changing the topography within the Chuckery area enormously. So we have to do some modeling and design a way to get the surface water from the disposal area to flow to the perimeter surface water ditches and eventually out to the Cuyahoga. So the ditches will vary in length and depth around the disposal cell. They'll slope toward the Cuyahoga River, and so we are proposing that the surface water will be discharged through 4 new outfall locations. So before we can begin any construction activities, we also need to obtain the necessary permits and approvals from the various regulatory agencies. Primary purpose, of course, is to ensure that we are in compliance with federal, state, and local environmental regulations, construction requirements, and that we sufficiently mitigate any major impacts or disturbances to surface water, endangered plant or animal species, and historic and cultural resources. So this process isn't simply just filling out an application. There is a significant amount of supporting documentation that was required and assessments. And many thanks go to Summit Metro Parks for the time and resources that they have put into conducting these assessments, crunching the data, drafting reports, developing monitoring and mitigation plans, and like this one for wetland delineation. They had staff walking the entire area, looking for all the wetlands and streams and documenting each one. Summit Metro Parks has also taken the lead on cultural and historic resources, again, walking the property, working with the University of Akron and other entities to identify and document the location and the condition of all of these historic and cultural resources that are found throughout the area. And so Metro Parks has also taken the lead on getting the concurrence from the State Historic Preservation Office, from tribes and other consulting parties. Thank you for that. And so Metro Parks also conducted an acoustic survey of the Cascade Valley and Gorge Metro Parks to determine the presence or probable absence of a selected list of bat species. So all of these major permits have been submitted, and we will obtain the necessary permits before the tree clearing work in the Chuckery area this winter. And last but not least, one of the things that has taken a fair amount of our time in the last couple of years is putting together these remedial design documents. So for each phase of the design, we've put together a package that details our decision-making process and assumptions for each component of the project. We attach to this basis of design report the results from our field investigations and our engineering evaluations. This package also includes plans and specifications, a cost estimate, construction schedule. So the plans are engineer drawings of the project components shown from different angles, like how the disposal area looks from above, but both before and after placement of the contaminated sediment, or it might show a cross-section of the river channel showing the elevation of the sediment surface, both before and after dredging. And their specifications are like written instructions of the equipment, materials, and methods for implementing the project. And right now we are currently working on our final design package, which will be the version that we use by the construction contractors when they bid on the project and implement the work. Okay, and so now I'm going to turn it over to Bill and Marty to talk about some of the changes to our remedial technology.
Right, so I'd like to kind of walk you through our design process. Originally, we have started with the feasibility study recommendation, discussed the project goals and vision, kind of bring you up to speed on some design constraints that we encountered during our design process, ultimately discuss the alternative design approach that we came up with to deal with the constraints, and then introduce a new solidification stabilization technology that we want to use, and then kind of describe how it will work in the actual field. As you can see here, you've seen plenty of this already. Major components of the project area, obviously, are the gorge dam itself, the gorge dam pool, the former power plant area, which will become a staging area for the dredging process, the pipeline that will follow the High Bridge Trail, and then ultimately up to the disposal area itself. And then we will also be utilizing the Indian Signal Tree parking lot area as additional support area. So as you see through the presentation that I'm doing and Marty, the overall objectives of the feasibility study are still maintained. It's just how we're going to achieve those goals. So just to give everybody an idea of what was discussed in the feasibility study, essentially the recommendation was to do hydraulic dredging and dewater the sediment using geotextile tubes. You can think of it as running mud through a sock. Sediment stays in, and water comes out. And the hydraulic dredge, think of it as a shop vac when you're cleaning water in your basement. It's sucking everything up. So that's, and then the geotubes would be staged again at the disposal area, the chuckery area. The other support mechanism for hydraulic dredging would be an extremely large water treatment system to clean up the water that comes off the geotubes, and then that water would need to meet discharge criteria, and then would have been discharged to the Cuyahoga River. Also with the design process, starting with the feasibility study, we worked with the stakeholders and EPA, US EPA, to develop the project goals and the vision for what the design should be. And we identified these key elements, including dredging, obviously as much sediment as we can possibly get. There are technological limitations to getting the sediment, both due to the technology we're going to use, but also just to the natural features of the gorge. You know, crevices, cracks. You know, we're not going to be able to get that. One of the goals that we also wanted to do was to decouple the sediment removal from the dam deconstruction. And the reason for that is with the hydraulic dredge, we would have to lower the water level first to get the hydraulic dredge to be able to get the sediment. So by using the mechanical dredging process that I'll discuss, we eliminate that issue. We also need, obviously, to protect all the existing utilities and critical structures, including Front Street Bridge and the storm sewers along the Chuckery area. We want to preserve cultural resources, minimize wetland impacts, cover the urban fill at the Chuckery area, and then create a structure that's usable for the future by grading, covering it with local borrow source to prevent invasive species, maintain a vegetated buffer along the river and Cuyahoga Street, and then ultimately restore the sports fields and parking lots because they're going to be in rough shape. As our design progressed, we identified some project constraints that weren't covered in the feasibility study, and that's very typical, so it's not a big surprise. For the dam pool, obviously critical structures were identified, and again, as I mentioned, the depth of the water and the thickness of the sediment, and then also the gradation and potential for oversized material that a hydraulic dredge wouldn't be able to remove. For the Chuckery area, some constraints that appeared were the existing utilities, wetlands, obviously the floodplain, wastewater management, if we were to stick with the hydraulic dredging, the overall disposal footprint, the required disposal capacity, and the based on the geotechnical investigation that Mary Beth mentioned, we found that some of the soil in the disposal area would need to be replaced with something a little more geotechnically acceptable. And then also, as mentioned previously, the concurrent stakeholder utility project, the City of Akron, that was something that we had to deal with also. So, taking all of that into account, we put our heads together and looked at switching from hydraulic dredging, which, as I mentioned, is basically a vacuum cleaner sucking the sediment off the bottom of the gorge, and then pumping at roughly, in this case, probably 5,000 gallons a minute up to the disposal area. We decided that it would be better to do mechanical dredging, which is essentially a crane with a clamshell bucket on the end. And I was thinking before this meeting, it's, for those of you that are young enough, it's probably when you had a little pocket toy that went down in the sandbox and pull it back up. That's kind of what it's like. And that minimizes water production, and it allows us to grab large rocks and trees and whatever else we're going to encounter under there and remove that. And then, as I mentioned, it limits the amount of wastewater that we would generate. So that's how, well, you know, and in the video that was shown, you could see, you know, the bucket go down, grabs sediment, puts it in the scow barge, and the scow barge moves it over, and then it gets pumped up. We also took a look at an alternative dewatering approach. Rather than trading 5,000 gallons a minute in geotextile tubes, we could do it with a smaller footprint, smaller staging area, and ultimately grade the material, the stabilized dredge material, any way we wanted. And we won't have any water to deal with. It'll be incorporated into the entire process. And the material will come out a lot stronger than it would if we used the geotextile tubes. And therefore, we can stack it higher and maximize the disposal volume within the footprint. Because the footprint that we have, that's all we have. So we need to get at least 1 million cubic yards of airspace to accommodate the sediment that we think we're going to get. So the solidification and stabilization technology, that's Marty's arena. So I'll have Marty discuss that.
So you might ask, what is solidification stabilization? Well, it's a widespread technology. What did you do with the, it's right there. So it's a widespread technology that's used all over the world. It basically uses cement to basically bind the soil and the waste that's in the sediment to increase its structural integrity, basically increase its strength, and to reduce the mobility and toxicity of the contaminants that are in the sediment. It allows you to use it on site, like we're going to do at the Chuckery area, or you could export it. So you can use it on site, like we're going to do on this project, or you could truck it away without it being all wet and messy. You can do it in place. We call it in situ, where you basically mix the cement into the sediment using augers and different types of equipment, or you can dig it out of the ground or take it out of the gorge and mix it in a stockpile. It's also a technology that has been used by EPA on their Superfund program from 1982 to 2011. It was used on over 280 projects. So it's a technology that is well-founded. So what did we do to evaluate that technology? Well, we did a treatability study, as Mary Beth talked about. As well as we also did some leach testing, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So for this evaluation, we collect sediment samples from the gorge. We're interested in variability. We'll find coarser material up gradient in the gorge and finer material down behind the back of the gorge. So that's really important to make sure that the technology will work on all types or mixes of the sediment. So the treatability study that we did it in 2 phases. The first phase was basically to determine whether or not the technology would work. So we used standard Portland cement, we mixed up some samples, and we ran the test, and we determined from that the technology would work for this application. Then in phase 2, we looked at some other factors, how we were going to get it out of the ground. Once it was out of the gorge, we would have to, after it's mixed, we would have to let it sit for several days to start the hydration process where the cement starts to bind together the sediment. We had to look at, we wanted to grade it so it fits into the site topography to make it look natural. We also had to consider compaction. As we're putting this in, we're compacting the material, which adds to the strength buildup of that sediment. And the results concluded that the technology would work and that it would allow us to cram more sediment into a smaller space. So we started out the feasibility study with a larger space that you saw in some previous slides, and what we wound up, we lost about 15 acres of space. So this technology gives us the opportunity to take that almost 1 million cubic yards of sediment and get it into the Chuckery area disposal area. The other thing that we evaluated was leaching. So there's some contaminants in the sediment. We wanted to understand how the solidification stabilization technology, how that bound up the contaminants. So we ran some tests using this synthetic precipitation leaching procedure on the samples that we prepared in the lab. And we compared the results, the leaching results, to the on-site groundwater as well as to aquatic life and human health criteria for the Lake Erie Basin. And the results that we got from the testing told us that it was comparable. The leaching, the liquid that came out of the sample, that the concentrations were similar to the groundwater in the Checker area. And based on that, we know that this technology is protective of human health and the environment. So I talked about having to get a lot more sediment into a much smaller space. So how are we going to do that? Well, this technology aids us in being able to do that. The technology uses the water that's in the sediment that we have to dewater using geotubes to start the hydration process, or basically increasing the strength of the sediment. Solidification, stabilization, it uses that water. So as part of the process, we don't have to dewater it. The water is dewatered by the process itself. It eliminates a lot of space that we would need on the Checker area site to put water holding tanks and build a temporary wastewater treatment plant. It also allows us to increase the disposal capacity that we can get into that smaller footprint by 15%. It increases the sediment strength. It allows us to mold it, shape it to look more natural. And it also eliminates the need to rely on the geotextile from the geotextile tubes for the dewatering. We don't rely on that geotextile to give the soft sediments strength. And it generally just allows us to maximize how we can use the site. So well, what I'm showing here on the outside are two soil berms. This is a cartoon. So we build short berms on the outside. We line it with a geomembrane to contain the wastewater that comes out of the dewatered sediment. And then the gray area represents, these are the geotextile tubes. So this is the feasibility study approach. We stack these geotextile tubes inside. And as we go up, we get smaller as we go up. And the real significant advantage of using this technology, solidification stabilization, that it basically allows us to eliminate those soil berms. We don't need the soil berms to contain the water, and it allows us to stack the sediment much higher. So that's how we fit all the extra sediment into a smaller space. So this technology, solidification stabilization, is an innovative technology, and we're going to use an inline mixing and transport approach to basically get the sediment out of the river and get it into the disposal area. So I don't know what I did.
Hit the up button.
Can you help me, Ramsey?
You need to go back or forward?
Back.
Yeah.
Hit the up, yeah.
So on the top left, there's a scow. So what you don't see is you don't see the dredge scooping the sediment out, but the dredge, the clamshell, puts it in the scow. You take it over to the shoreline. You take the sediment out of the scow. The green piece of equipment puts it into a sieve. You take out the oversized material. That material gets taken off-site for disposal. Come down to the bottom left. This is the innovative technology where we're going to introduce the cement into the sediment. It's going to dewater it, and then we're going to pipe it over to the disposal area, which is item number 5, where we're going to distribute it across that 30 acres. And that is how this technology will work to save space.
All right, just a few more slides. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work that we are focused on completing over the next few months. So remember that forensic engineering investigation I talked about earlier at the former power plant property. So the results that came back were that the concrete structure on the upstream end of the property is fine. We can dredge right up against that wall. The rest of the sheet pile that extends for pretty much the rest of the length of that property is not going to be stable enough for us in some sections in the short term, and other sections in the long term, for us to be able to remove that sediment and to keep the property stable after the dam comes down. So we were talking with the stakeholders about what to do, and there really isn't, the city of Akron owns this property, there really isn't a future use that's been identified for this property. Stakeholders don't really want to utilize our funds to try to keep that sheet pile wall in place. And so one of the options that we have, so the city of Akron is actually going to be doing some restoration on the gorge after the sediment removal, after the dam removal. So why not just have them come in and do a small restoration project before we start dredging? So that's currently the plan. We still have to get approval for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding for it. We're going to have to try to fast track a standalone design for doing this work. The conceptual plan right now is to excavate the material behind the wall and to grade the land back, and then to actually remove the sheet pile wall. So we are moving ahead on that standalone design package. And so the Front Street Bridge, we've got a number of critical structures throughout our project area. So we conducted a pre and post dredge evaluation on the Front Street Bridge's foundation and the side slopes that the abutments sit on to ensure the structural integrity of the bridge. Make sure that it's maintained after the sediment is removed from the dam pool and the water is drawn down. So the results indicate that there are no significant impacts on the foundation supporting the bridge after sediment removal. However, there could be some minor sloughing on the side slopes. So the City of Akron's design contractor is also tasked with bank stabilization. So we will be working with them over the next few months, along with some county engineers, on when and how best to address any potential slope instability issues. Potentially more work that needs to be done before we can do sediment remediation. Back to the disposal area. We actually have to go back out into the field and collect some additional samples, some additional soil samples. So we had mentioned earlier how there is a layer of soft material, mostly along the perimeter of the disposal area, that needs to be excavated. And right now we just have a general sense of that, the extent of that area, and how deep we need to go to excavate that soft material. So the purpose of this sampling is to really refine, get the best information that we can about how much material we're going to have to excavate and take off site, and the volume of material that we're going to need to backfill. And we are hoping to also utilize a nearby local borrow source to so we don't have to import clean fill. Use material that's already nearby. So I mentioned the critical structures. So in addition to the Front Street Bridge, we also have the dam itself. We don't want the dam to come down before it is designed. It's designed to. We don't want contaminated sediment running downstream, and so we, along with the utility, the City of Akron's sewer that's on the south side of our disposal area. There's also the Chuckery Race, which is a historic structure that runs along the entire length of High Bridge Trail, which is where our pipeline is also running. So we are working with the stakeholders, the property owners, to come up with what the minimum requirements are and develop a monitoring plan so we can ensure that all these critical structures are safe and protected and come up with a contingency plan if there's something that if there's any movement that we discover in the field. So we are working on that. And then also, we also heard a little bit about the North Side Intercept tunnel system, the tunnel project that the city is working on. And so they kicked off the design, I believe, earlier this year. And so, once you know it, the project footprints overlap on each other. So we are going to, within that red circle, basically where the pipeline runs west of Main Street and our staging areas, we are going to be adjusting those to make sure that we stay out of each other's way. All right, schedule. So just some major project milestones. This isn't everything that we have to do over the next year, but it gives you a snapshot of the activities that we need to complete and when over the next year. So, as the critical structures and the former power plant property, we need to continue working on our engineering evaluations between now and next spring. You heard Mike talk about clearing trees at the Chuckery area, and we need the trees to be down before we can go out and collect the additional soil samples that we need at the disposal area. So that's going to happen over November through February timeframe. And then our goal is to submit our final design package in the spring of 23. Also, we heard from Mike that we want to get that disposal area preparation started in the summer of 23. And if we can get the approval for funding, we also want to start on any restoration or bank stabilization work that needs to be done before we can start dredging the sediment. And 2023 is our big year for us, so we're really hoping to award that sediment remediation contract. Ultimately, we want to be digging mud in 2024, and so we need to get that contract in place before the end of the calendar year of 2023. So this is our schedule if everything goes according to plan. There's a lot of a million of other steps along the way, but we, as a stakeholder group, we're going to try our best to maintain this time frame. So costs. So what we can tell you is that the construction of the disposal area and the implementation of the sediment remediation project will be over $100 million. So we do have a more refined cost estimate, but we can't share that information just yet, partly because we haven't completed the design, but also because the design will be competitively bid among a set of pre-qualified contractors through a sediment remediation contract that the US EPA has. And we want those contractors to do their due diligence to develop an estimate based on how much they think it will cost to implement the plans and specifications in our design document. And then we will use our cost estimate as an independent check to determine and make sure that we are getting a fair and reasonable price. But once the construction contract is awarded, then we can announce the award amount. So the disposal project will be 100% federally, 100% funded by non-federal sources. The sediment remediation project will be implemented under the Great Lakes Legacy Act program, which is a cost share program. So the federal government will pay up to 65% of the total project costs, and one or more non-federal sponsors will provide at least 35% of the total project cost in cash or in-kind contributions. So our project partners are working really hard to develop a funding plan for both these projects. So I know that we're going to have a Q&A session after the end of all the presentations. We'll take any questions then, but I do want to thank our project teams, Summit Metro Parks, the City of Akron, City of Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio EPA, Ohio Lake Erie Commission, First Energy, Summit County, and Ohio DNR for their participation in countless conference calls and all of their time and resources that they have spent on the design. It's truly been a group effort. So I'll turn it back over to you.
right, it's easy to see who the brains of the operation is here. Thank you, Marty, Bill, and Mary Beth. All right, next, I'd like to introduce you to Bill Swiski. He is the environmental supervisor for the Ohio EPA, and he's going to touch on dam removals and water quality in Ohio. Maybe.
So when Elaine told me I was doing this, that's what I was told I was going to do. And then Michael takes away some of the wind out of my sails. Mary Beth takes away a little more, and then Michael's going to take the rest of it at the end. So thanks. But first of all, thank you all for being here. This is awesome. As an EPA person, when we typically have a public meeting, let's just say the audience is generally not as friendly. So this is a wonderful turn of events, and just look around and see how many folks are really interested. And when we started doing these, this has been just incredible to have the participation. So Mary Beth did say it was a 65-35 match. There will be hats and a tip jar on your way out. So if you want to toss in, have at it. So I kind of want to touch on a few things that were started but maybe not made completely clear as how the state is participating. So that 35% match is for the sediment project. So we're pulling the sediment out, we're doing all that work. The locals have to build the landfill that the material will be placed in. The reason being, by funding it locally, we get to do an in-kind, an equivalent charge for every yard of sediment that gets placed there. We will have a cost, and then that material, that goes into our match. So when you think of how many tons at our rate, that is a huge percentage of our match that is only achieved by paying for it locally. The way we are going to achieve that locally is Ohio EPA. We have a division in Columbus that loans out, and when I say millions, I'm on hundreds of millions of dollars a year to all our local communities in the state to do these big infrastructure projects. Well, they are way smarter at managing the checkbook than I am, and what they're able to do is the interest money that comes back, they are able to utilize some of it to fund environmental projects across the state. That funding is half in land purchases of significant environmental areas and half in restoration projects. So if you think the Monroe Falls Dam, Kent Dams, the two in Cuyahoga Falls, those were paid for by this program. We are going to utilize that program to help fund the construction of the sediment fill. So that's locally funded, and that allows us this access, and that's a wonderful thing that we're able to do that.
How much is it going to cost?
So I'll answer. No questions, but I'll throw that in. It's going to be about $8 million to $10 million, give or take, right now. So that's all locally funded. And as Mary Beth mentioned, this sediment design is continually being refined. So as the engineers get closer to having their final design, the noise or the estimates get refined, so we'll have a much more pinpointed action. But when you think about 900,000 cubic yards, no more. When we think about that, 900,000 yards, and my favorite sedimentologist, Dr. Peck, is sitting here. On a rainy day, if you are ever standing where the canal diversion dam used to be, when that river flows up, every day there are thousands of tons of material being carried past you by the river. Rivers exist to move sediment, so it is a lot of material, but the Cuyahoga River moves that much material on its own. So we're just trying to do what the river couldn't do, because that wall stops that process. So all the sediment that's in that dam pool eventually would have ended up in Lake Erie. So it just got stopped, but then that industrial history mixed in, and that's why we have to manage it differently. So we're looking at doing that. Hopefully, as was said, 2023 is when this facility is going to be constructed. And we just had a conversation today, and Ohio EPA's part of this is the Lake Erie Commission and Ohio EPA are working together. So Lynn Garrity is our Lake Erie project manager. Without her, I would have lost hope and all emotional support a long time ago. So I would like to thank Lynn for continuing to help us move this forward. And the city of Akron, Heather Ullinger, through the Akron Waterways Renewed project, has been the sponsor of the design of the sediment facility. And without that, we would really be in a little behind where we are at. And ideally, Ohio EPA, for the big project Mary Beth was talking about, we're actually hoping to submit our application. I just found out this week. And so then it goes through what we call technical review, where we're going to go to Chicago. We've been authorized to go to Chicago. And I want to go to Buddy Guy's part. That's really, I'll do the presentation, but I really want to go see Buddy Guy's place. So we're going to do that. And then over the winter break through December to January, US EPA is going to review our application. We will address any comments, and then that'll put us on the timeline that Mary Beth had. So when I would have started, well, to all the old EPA employees, I'm the last one that hasn't retired yet. And they would have never thought we would have got this far, and it is truly amazing. And thank you all for participating.
All right, thank you, Bill. I'd like to bring back Mike Johnson for some closing thoughts about ecology.
Thank you. And as Bill mentioned, I did steal his stuff, and I'm going to talk about some of his stuff and some of the other stuff that's going on in and around our river, and a lot of it is related to the Gorge Dam, but not all of it. You know, our Cuyahoga River is nationally and internationally known. I mean, this river at one time was so sick it was almost dead. Today, it is the poster child of what you can do in terms of rebirth and restoration. You know, we have a lot to be proud of when thinking about our region and our river. Okay, here we go. We'll get it here in a second. So the title of this talk is Deep Science of the Cuyahoga River, and I like to have a lot of subtitles or alternative names to my presentations. So rather than Deep Science, this is Deep Thoughts by Summit Metro Parks. And if you get the reference, you are an SNL fan and you are old. Just like me. So. The first thing I want to talk about is the great work that our Ohio EPA has done. You know, and Bill Zawiski is one of those great leaders at the Ohio EPA that has done so much work in the past. You know, our Ohio EPA leads the nation and actually the whole world in developing a set of tools to evaluate water quality. Those tools are called biocriteria, and I'm going to talk about some of those in a minute. But I do have to share just a humorous story. 30 years ago, or maybe a little bit more, my employer, I was just out of college, I was working for a consulting firm, and my employer sent me to New Orleans to go to a wastewater conference, and I was there to drum up work for the company. This was a international conference attended by wastewater professionals, and there were two types of people: the people who put waste into the water, and then on the other side, usually state agencies who work to make sure that the stuff that goes into the river isn't so bad and we don't pollute too much. So there were thousands of people there, and I decided to go to a small workshop called biocriteria. And I went to this workshop and I was kind of surprised. I actually learned nothing. And the reason I learned nothing is I was from Ohio. All these people wanted to do was talk about what's going on in Ohio. What's going on in Ohio? And they asked if anybody in the room was from Ohio, and I raised my hand, and they're like, how did you do it? How did you get biocriteria? How did you do that? I'm like, I just read the manual. I am an applied scientist. I'm not a primary researcher. I am going to talk about some of the primary research that's going on in the Cuyahoga River. And the end of that story was kind of funny. They broke into two. This big room broke into two groups. On one side, you had this group talking about how can we do this in our state. And on the other side, you had a group talking about how can we stop this in our state. So, fortunately, the side of water quality is winning out more and more every day. And this is just the manual on streams and rivers and restorations, and our very own Bill Zawiski helped write one of these chapters. And what Bill did is he went through all the state's data and looked at data they had in and around dams. And he looked at the data they had below dams, the data that they had from inside the dams, and the data they had from upstream of the dams. And the first tool they looked at is called the Qualitative Habitat Evaluation Index. It's a measure of water quality based on habitat, the physical habitat. And as you might expect, the results kind of showed that downstream of dams, you had great habitat. Upstream of dams, you had great habitat. But that blue area, that's the dam pool itself, you had very poor physical habitat. Dams are built on rivers. The pool that forms behind dams is not a river, it is not a lake, it is an impoundment. And it doesn't have the habitat that fish and aquatic wildlife need. The next thing they did is Bill went in and looked at all the fish data. And the fish data was pretty similar. Down upstream of the dams, you had good fish communities. Downstream of the dam, you had pretty good fish communities. Inside the dam pool, the fish communities were heavily impacted. And that dotted line represents the minimum value you need to have to attain basic water quality standards in Ohio. So you can see dams are not good for habitat, dams are not good for fish. And similarly, Ohio EPA has developed an index that measures water quality based on macroinvertebrates, or the insects that live in the water. And similar situation, upstream of the dam pool, macroinvertebrate communities are doing well. Downstream, they're not doing so well, but in the dam pool, they are impacted. But if you look at this, in the dam pool, the macroinvertebrates, they are impacted, but not quite as much as the fish. And can anyone guess why macroinvertebrates might be less impacted by a dam pool than fish?
They like mud.
They like mud? Well, they do like mud, but they have an escape mechanism. They have a life cycle that allows them to fly. And most of them are able to avoid some of the impacts of dam by simply flying over them. Let's see. The next thing I want to talk about is this really great surprise that came with Mary Beth and her team with US EPA. About a year or two into the project, we got a call from some researchers at US EPA wanting to come in and do some very basic research. And they were coming in from all over the country and doing all sorts of amazing things. We had researchers contacting us wanting to do baseline studies on macroinvertebrates, birds, bats, all the terrestrial wildlife, fish. We were not expecting these people to come. These are primary researchers. These are people who are doing the research that leads to the future manual that hasn't been written yet. And it was a really wonderful surprise. We didn't know they were coming. I got a call one day from some guy, and he's like, well, how do I get my boat into the gorge? We need to meet. And we did meet. And not only did Metro Parks meet with them, but a lot of our partners and your public servants from all around came together to help these people get into our river so that they could study our gorge, study our river, and basically they will be able to tell us someday all the benefits that we are reaping from removing this dam structure. And here are just some of our partners: the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. Geologic Survey, ODNR, Summit Metro Parks, and the National Park Service, all out with these folks, helping them get familiar with the gorge, and we know all the secret ways in and out. So. One of the people that I'm going to talk most about is this guy named Matt Aker, and he works for USGS, and he's studying the fish in the Cuyahoga River, and he wants to know how these fish are currently moving in the river now, and what will happen when we take the dam out. How will they move in the river? You know, dams are an impediment to fish movement. It prevents fish from moving upstream, downstream. We are also looking at the gene flow of the fish in the river. You know, the dam has been in place so long that there are populations of fish upstream of the dam that are genetically unique and different from their cousins downstream of the dam. Given 1 million years, they might actually evolve into a new species. But we are looking at the genetic composition of those fish now and comparing that to what's going to happen when the dam comes down. It's just, like I said, very cool, very basic primary research. Matt is, in order to study this, he's inserting these devices to the underside of the fish's skin. It gives off a signal that can be picked up by towers that are located all up and down the Cuyahoga River through Gorge and Cascade Valley, and possibly through the national park as well. Matt is in that center picture. He's holding a very unusual fish. That fish is called
There we go.
There it is. That fish is called a big mouth buffalo. And a lot of cool, this is a really cool fish, and I want to tell you a little bit about this fish. This is an ancient species, and it is a very long-lived species. This fish is probably older than anybody in this room. That fish is probably close to 100 years old. It is an imperiled fish. It is listed by the IUCN as imperiled. It has a lower level of impairment, but it is in jeopardy. And the number one thing that impacts this fish is dams. Dams prevent this particular fish from going from Lake Erie, where they spend their adult life, to their spawning grounds. They spawn in streams and rivers, and dams prevent them from doing that. Now, this fish has never been seen in the Akron area before, but this one was found at Valley View. And the reason it was found, that we were able to find it here recently, has nothing to do with the Gorge Dam. It has to do with another dam. The other dam is the Brecksville Dam, or the Canal Diversion Dam. This is downstream of us here in Akron, and this dam was recently removed thanks to our partners at the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, the Ohio EPA, NEFCO, and most importantly, our local Friends of the Crooked River. Friends of the Crooked River is a 501c3 nonprofit. Yeah. And they oversaw the contracts that removed this dam, and kudos to them and everybody who did that. Akron, Cuyahoga Falls is now connected to Lake Erie uninterrupted. The fish of Lake Erie now have access to our region. And the only reason this fish got here is because of that project. We'll take questions in just a minute.
Did they throw it back?
What?
They didn't keep
Yes.
the fish.
Yes.
No, we threw it back. That fish has probably spent the last century bumping its head against the Brecksville Dam. I had just hoped that when it got here, it found some love. And speaking of that, some of these fish, the big-mouth buffalo, it got here on its own, but some animals might need a little bit of help. This is a lake sturgeon. This is native to Lake Erie, and much like the big-mouth buffalo, it's really been heavily impacted by dams. They need to come up into these smaller rivers and streams to spawn and reproduce, and dams really have hurt them a lot. And just by the way, this is also another ancient fish. It is not a shark. It looks like a shark. It's actually a harmless fish. This one was actually caught in Lake Erie out in the Toledo area near the mouth of the Maumee. But we do hope to see them soon in the Cuyahoga River. Some of these fish need a little bit of help, and we're working with some regional partners on that help. I'll let them explain their project. Did you advance that, Ramsey? Thank you.
We're here today on the Cuyahoga River to do some habitat assessments. There's been a lot of interest in lake sturgeon conservation, and we are going to be assessing the habitat, make sure it's suitable for lake sturgeon spawning. Lake sturgeon are looking for areas with cobble or gravel substrate with decent flow to keep water moving over those eggs within the substrates. And then once those eggs hatch, those young fish are going to be looking for some slower areas that are more sandy and gravelly.
Ramsey, could you just advance it to the next slide? You know, one of the themes here, you know, our river is really, our Cuyahoga is getting mightier and mightier every day. You might say our river has mussels. I'm not talking about these mussels. I'm talking about these mussels. Freshwater mussels. Did you know freshwater mussels are native to our river? And much like a lot of other species, they were decimated by the industrial era of pollution. And they really are making a comeback. You might imagine they might need a little help. Mussels don't exactly move very fast. And they are getting that help. Our friends at the Cuyahoga Valley National Park are working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to breed and reintroduce mussels back into the Cuyahoga River. In order to do that, you need to get breeding stock. This is Ryan Trimbath, one of the biologists at Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and he's out in the Grand River collecting mussels for the breeding program. One cool thing about mussels is they have very interesting names. There's a mussel called a wartyback. There's a mussel, one of my favorites is called a heel splitter. The mussels that Ryan is collecting today, they're called fat muckets. Say it 10 times fast. And, you know, these names are really, I just think, really interesting and colorful, and I think they could be adopted for other uses. If there are any representatives of our fine breweries in the area, I think you have the name of your next season already. It is a race. Let's make it a race among our breweries. And I just want to leave with this, I'm almost done, but I just love this picture. You know, we live in an era where technology is taking over so much of our work. It's nice to see simple things. This is how you study mussels in the wild. The traffic department is missing a few parking cones. The last thing I want to leave you with is this concept, this growing concept of conservation and water quality. You know, water quality doesn't end at the river's edge. It includes land around it. And as our Cuyahoga River has gotten cleaner and cleaner, people want more and more access to it. And the parks and conservation organizations have responded by buying and acquiring and conserving that land around the river. Today, the Cuyahoga River in the Akron-Cuyahoga Falls area is protected by a continuum of parks. Gorge Metro Park flows into Cascade Valley, joins with the Little Cuyahoga River, flows through our new Valley View area before it touches on San Bren and heads off to the national park. And that interplay between conserving land and water quality really is best said by our very own Elaine Marsh. If you don't know Elaine, she was the witch who checked you in. But I would like to just share her words. Go ahead, Lindsay.
If you protect contiguous land along the river, you are absolutely enfolding the river in protection. And this is a perfect demonstration of that.
And that is the end of my presentation, and we're going to open it up for questions.
Okay, I'd like to remind our virtual friends that are attending via the website to please use the contact@summitmetroparks.org if you have questions. So Stephanie, how would you like to arrange the questions?
Open the floor, and then I'll turn this on, and I'll bring the mic over to anyone who has a question. And then Lisa will repeat it for those in the room who may not have it.
We can't hear you, Steph.
Is this on yet? Okay, great. So we're going to use this. Just raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll come over to you with the mic. And then the appropriate person from our stakeholder committee will answer that question for you. Lisa, if you could repeat the question for our virtual friends, that will probably be helpful as well. So, does anybody have a question? All right, we've got somebody right back here. Where did I see that hand?
Having been to the court, I understand one of the great views of the falls will be missing if we don't have a viewpoint. The way I understand it is if the dam structure is left there, they need to go away and be able to see the falls.
So the question is, if the dam structure is removed, how will we have a viewpoint of the falls?
It looked like the study said that the part of the dam was going to stay there.
So if part of the dam stays there, what will the view be?
So the plan is to leave the abutment structures and remove the dam in between. We think that the abutment structures can house where a future overlook could be. So it's a concept at this point. We haven't vetted it all the way through. It's not designed, but it's a thought where we might be able to get a beautiful view of the river. And the falls, of course.
Yes.
I noticed that any discussion of the chemical analysis of the sediments was absent in the presentation. And I'm interested in what are the chemicals of concern in the sediment? Is it a hazardous waste? And what would be done to contain the sediment during the dredging process so that when it's suspended, it's not entering the river?
So the question was about the chemistry of the sediment, and it wasn't mentioned. And yes, it was touched on, but if you go to Ohio EPA's website or Great Lakes Mud, there's a bunch of information on the sediment. So the US EPA came in 2009 and 2011, and there is a really large, mostly boring report, if you're into it, to read about the sediment. There were hundreds of samples taken of the chemistry. So the big things in there are cadmium, lead, PAHs, which is coal burning stuff from all of what we did here, and low levels of PCBs. When you're asking how is it regulated, we analyze things and we ask the question, are you a hazardous waste? And the answer for the sediment in the gorge sample is no. And then the other thing is for PCBs, there's a federal program we call TSCA, the Toxic Substances Control Act. And we ask the question, are you regulated by that? And the answer is no. So in our world, this level of contamination is not something we want going in the river. And then when Marty and Bill talked about the way they're going to bind sediment up, that is one of the attractive things about how they're proposing to manage the sediment, is it is going to bind that into a matrix that will not get into the river. So there is a whole bunch of information on sediment, and the reports are all on Ohio EPA's website.
Yes, over here.
Sure, add away.
Just real quick, I also want to say that during the dredging process, we will be measuring in real time what the turbidity is above and below the dam. And so that is one of our criteria, that we will make sure that we are not increasing, have a net increase in turbidity during dredging. And so we are also looking at other controls that we can put in place, like turbidity curtains, to help contain the suspended sediment into a small area where we can manage it.
Back here.
I just want to say thanks to everything you guys have done. It's been a lot of work. Kind of on the forefront of dam removal as humanity. So congratulations, that's awesome. My question is, yeah, let's do that. My question is, for people that live nearby on the river like me, that dredging is going to take a couple of years. And I've walked through that river cleaning it. It's very smelly, that sediment. Is that going to be pretty significant smell, and is there anything being done to mitigate that?
So the question is there going to be an odor associated with the sediment and anything to mitigate it? So that's a darn good question. I mean, if you've been in there and if you've paddled up to the headwaters of the dam pool, you see bubbles coming up, and that's organic material venting. So is there going to be an odor associated with this? There has to be in some way, because you're moving it from point A to point B. The whole point of this encapsulation is that you're going to bind that up. So Unfortunately, I don't know that there's I know exactly what's going to happen. Things are going to be done to minimize it. Everything is in a tube. So when you're looking at it traveling from where it's dredged to where it's placed, it is totally enclosed in a tube. So it does not have access to air as it's moving through the valley. How that's going to pan out, we'll all have to see. But obviously, the goal is not to create a public nuisance, it's to do a good thing. So if things, just like this whole project, as changes come along, the team adapts to those and will manage accordingly.
Yes, here in the front.
I wanted to ask about that. I'm calling it the SS Mountain. It's going to be built. So what is the life of that mountain? We know that concrete degrades. So over time, are we creating another problem for the future and future generations?
Well, it's not going to be concrete per se. It's not going to be like a big hunk of concrete. What, pardon me? Well, the percentage is going to change so that they have control of the mix. The whole point of this is the stability and encapsulation of the material. Can, over time, it move? If we don't protect that cap, erosion can occur. So that's incumbent on the stewards of the land, is to keep that cap intact.
Yeah, we're going to add some Portland cement to it, and it's going to be a soil-like material. It's not going to be concrete. It's going to be, you can, once it's hardened, you can mold it and shape it. So it's going to be a soil-like material that happens to have maybe between 8 or 10% Portland cement by volume.
Which does degrade over time.
Portland cement.
Cement.
It becomes part of the matrix of the soil. It's not going to degrade over time.
It's going to have a soil-like consistency, which we're going to vegetate. So over time, even if the cement is degrading, it's only 10% of everything, and then it will have a root structure. So, you know, I'm sure that we could figure out exactly what that means. We saw in the video that the settlement will happen to about 12 inches overall.
Basically what we're doing is we're manufacturing a stronger soil material. We're taking the sediments, which are a weak soil material, we're adding an additive to it, which is the cement, which is creating a stronger material, and it's going to stand on its own forever.
I would add one thing, you know, we are not bringing this sediment in. It's already here. It's at the bottom of the dam pool, and it is spread out over 1.5 miles of dam pool. We are putting it in a better location where it can be managed in perpetuity. So it is, I understand your question. What we are doing and the way we are managing it will be better for the environment in perpetuity than what we have right now.
If it's managed.
Correct. I mean, ideally, it'd be great if we could just make it disappear, but unfortunately, we cannot.
Other questions? Right here in the front.
Thank you very much for all of your work and your dedication to improving our city. I have lived here all my life. I don't know what you mean by the chuckery.
Great question, thank you.
So when we refer to the chuckery, what we mean is Peck Road. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
It's been called the chuckery for quite a while. I'm not exactly sure when. It was started to call the chuckery, but we named that area of Cascade Valley the chuckery area. But it's Peck Road.
Tell me where Peck Road is.
It's the entrance. We have 2 park entrances on Cuyahoga Street. One is the Oxbow area. The other is the chuckery area. It's a little bit further south. That's Peck Road.
Across from the prison where it used to be. Depending on how old time you are.
Yes.
Just a quick question on Highridge Trail you mentioned a bunch of times. There are a lot of us local people that hike and walk and run through there and all. of course, it's been closed because the wood structure has been falling off the side of the hill kind of thing, but I saw some comments online, maybe it was on a Summit Metro page or something about after some pipelines or something were recreated or whatever, then they were gonna do it, but is there any thought to being able to do a workaround? Do you know what I mean, on High Bridge? Yeah, it's like, you can't do it anymore. And I know you gotta do things in the right order, but is there any?
Well, you just said it. We knew this project was coming. It was picking up steam. It was becoming a reality. So it is, the wood structure is an expense. And it didn't make sense for us to build one fresh before we're gonna make a mess of it. So yes, there is, it's on our radar.
You know people in
Oh, yes.
the process. You know?
Yes.
So I'm just saying, like, there is a danger factor for everybody.
We understand, yep.
I know you guys. Thank you.
What will be the duration of the dredging, and has this inline introduction of the stabilization cement, has that been done in a project of this magnitude elsewhere?
Well, to answer your first question, I believe that that the duration of the sediment remediation, the actual dredging part of the project is about 10 months if we had zero delays, zero weather delays, or zero, equipment. And if we just worked all the way through, even through the winter. So it'll probably be a little bit longer than 10 months, but I think it was 10 to 14. You remember what it was? Oh, 16 months. Sorry. Yeah, 16 months for the.
So across 2 construction seasons, right?
Yes. And then you want to answer about
As far as the inline technology, there's many ways to mix the cement into the sediment. So this technology happens to be one of them, and it has been used before on a project similar, not, I don't believe, to the magnitude in terms of the total volume, but it's been used before for a project like this, stabilizing sediments.
Other questions? Anyone in the back? I feel like I haven't gotten back there in a while.
What type of vegetation will be planted on top of the sediment once you've got it in place and it's settled?
Remember the cannabis deal.
Yes. Right.
That's how we're making money.
I'll answer that in 2 parts. I want to go back to the last question. We were concerned, like, what's going to grow in this stuff? And we did ask the consultants for a local example where this has been used. They did send us one. It's called Bark Camp, and it's kind of in central PA. Some representatives from Metro Parks in the city of Akron, we went out to take a look at it just to see how it looked. This is one that had been done, I think, 15 years ago, and it was growing vegetation, native vegetation. It looked like a field. So that kind of gave us some confidence. To answer your question directly, what are we going to plant on it? We will utilize a native seed mix that is going to be very similar to the mix that we used at our Valley View area, the new park that we just opened. And that's actually just right across the street from where this disposal area is going to be. So we're going to use a native mix like that. That stuff will get established pretty quickly. And over time, we're also going to work to reforest it, to plant trees. So the goal is that it will return to a forest and blend in with the park.
Okay, I think I saw someone back here. On the way.
Are there any studies planned for post-dam removal for the water rushing down through the valley?
So the question was, are there any post-studies planned? And the big answer is yes. Michael talked a little bit about all the really in-depth studies that'll be done. Ohio EPA monitors water quality, and that will not change. In fact, our interests are pretty much the same as the other researchers, and we'll continue to do some of that monitoring before, during, and after, because it helps us understand what's going on, and it gives us this wealth of information for the next project so we can learn from it. So the answer is yes.
I think he also might have been referring to the hydrologic studies about what exactly will happen when the dam comes down.
Oh, so yes. Oh, so from a flow standpoint, there has been modeling done. So it's typically, in our world, it's called a HEC-RAS model. It's a hydrologic evaluation. It's an Army Corps of Engineers model, and we do that at every dam removal we do, because that's the same question we ask is, when we're doing these projects, one oops, typically if it's a rock or a tree falling in, that's a little oops. For us, it's a bridge, and that would be a big oops. So we want to understand that. The reason what happens is water level is going to change. No doubt about it. You're losing the dam pool, and it's going to go faster. And those are consistent things because the dam pool, in addition to altering the depth, alters the velocity. So if you look at coming through the gorge area where the hotels are, and you look at the varying speeds of water through there, that is what is currently buried under the pool. How exactly is it going to look? You need someone who was born in probably 1880 and a geologist to tell you how that looks. But if you just take a look at what existing under where the new river's free flowing there, that's what our expectations are. There's going to be points that are faster and points that are still pool. But we'll all learn together.
I was just going to add, just because I've heard the question before, how exactly the dam is coming down and whether the water will all rush downstream at once. And like we saw in the video, the dam will be deconstructed in pieces, right? So there will not be one big rush of water, which is an important part of the deconstruction process. We get that question a lot, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. Like out west, they've blown them up. And that, while really cool, there's some implications for that. Godzilla tearing down, I have a nice video of Godzilla tearing a dam down. He wasn't available. So we found, if you saw the falls, have you seen how that worked in Cuyahoga Falls? It was a little chunk at a time, and it lowers the pool a chunk at a time. That's what we're anticipating, because controlling that energy is equally important.
Okay, my question is, will the deconstruction of the dam occur immediately after the sedimentation is removed? And do you have a timeline for completion of the final project?
Well, so I'll expand on what Mary Beth had said, because understand we have a perfect world, and then we have the world we call reality. In the perfect world, 2023, we build our little mud landfill. 24 and 25, we suck it out and put it in this landfill downstream. And in 25, 26, the dam comes out. This is subject to Mother Nature. There's a boat floating, pulling sediment up. If Mother Nature decides I want to rain really heavy and mess up what flows in Cuyahoga, well, that schedule now just got longer. And then the other thing is this structure is solid concrete. And as we found with some of the Cuyahoga Falls, some of this concrete is pretty tough. So what we want to happen and what the equipment is actually able to do, again, until we're beaten on that, when we took the canal diversion dam out, it was only 8 feet tall. I'm like, this ain't gonna be too hard. Well, it was. So we'll find out as they're beating on it. But that's the anticipated schedule. Is it subject to change? Absolutely.
All right, we've got another question over here, and then after this, I think we have time for probably one or two more.
Yeah, I live on the north side of below the dam by Mary Campbell's Caves. Now, down by the river, you still have open sewer. Maybe it's coming from the storm sewers, I don't know, but sometimes the smell, it's not coming from the river, it's
actually going into the river, and you also have two giant pipes on Front Street on the south side, and they get off of it. There's something going on in both. Are they going to deal with that?
So there are two big sewer projects underway. One with Cuyahoga Falls and one with City of Akron. So the timing, it's probably more of a blessing for their projects than a curse that the park's going to be closed. So we are working together to see if that window can work for them on anything they need to do in both cities.
So they know about
They are aware, yes. Thank you.
Oh gosh, I keep walking in front of that thing.
Just a question. I noticed on one of the slides, you were talking about taking down the cement, the concrete wall that runs along the river in one of the slides. And isn't that better to preserve that for erosion's sake into the water? I mean,
So you're speaking about the wall that's along the the first where the power plant used to be, that wall. And that wall, what Mary Beth said is that the concrete part is structurally fine. It's the part that's the metal that we call sheet piling, and it rusts and erodes over years. And give it a few more years, it won't be there.
so that's not on the water side of the wall, it's on the soil side of the wall?
Well, I mean, it's between the water and the native soils, and they're still behind some of these. So we have this moment right now to incorporate this into restoration so that when these walls fail, because these cement, the cement is good, the metal structure, they rust all the time. In the Cleveland, they replace sheet piling all the time. We have this opportunity to remove the fill and the wall behind it because it'll eventually fail and end up in the river. So this is our moment to restore that.
Yes. This will probably be our last one, but please remember, we do have the email address up here, and we're happy to take your questions that way as well.
Yeah, I was just wondering who was going to manage the bank restoration once the water level comes down, and the artifact collection. I mean, that was an issue when we took down the last dam in the falls. Well, all three of them.
We are. The question was, who is going to manage the restoration of the river itself, and who will be responsible for managing any artifacts that emerge from the water as the pool is lowered? And the answer to that is largely going to be the Summit Metro Parks and working with our partners, especially the City of Akron. City of Akron did include in their grant for dam removal, they included some money for restoration. We don't anticipate that there's going to be as much need for actual restoration as there was with some of the other dam removals. And that's just because under the water here is a rock gorge. So there's only so much erosion that can take place in a rock gorge. So we're not anticipating as much. But we do have on staff at the Metro Parks 2 archaeologists. They are our cookie hostesses over there. And they will be working with the project team to help with regards to any artifacts that emerge from the depths of the pool.
What can we do to help?
That hat I talked about.
Start tomorrow.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, again, for coming to witness our public meeting tonight. So we anticipate holding our next public meeting in the spring of '23. That'll be an update about the final sediment design, projected schedule, and funding sources. So don't forget to check out our new website and sign up for email updates if you like.
Thank you.